All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 21 for the online Rankin Technical College AWD1000 Web Development Technologies class for the fall 2023 semester. As mentioned in today's email, the plan today is to go over Murox chapters 13, 14, and 15, including the Halloween exercises. All right, and then tomorrow we'll finish up the book. I do want to mention something. The other day, I said 11 through 19 in here, etc. And believe it or not, I was right. The reason for that is we're using the 5th edition of the book. I was given the 4th edition of the book, and the 4th edition had 19 chapters. They collapsed 2 chapters into one in the 5th edition. So, I mean, if that confuses you, don't worry about it. By tomorrow, we'll be done with the book. All right. I do want to mention, too, that before we go on into chapter 13, yesterday I had problems in chapter 11 when you clicked on the deranged cat. The problem was in my CSS. And what I'm going to do is, because I kept tweaking the CSS and finally it worked. I'm going to show it to you now. But I will send everybody a copy of the working CSS file because now it looks like this, which is the way it's supposed to look. All right. Before my 2 was really big and this stuff was down here, etc. And now it works. And I don't know why, because I just kept tweaking it. And I should have tweaked it and run it, but I tweaked it about 10 or 12 times and then ran it. So I'm not sure what I did that made it work. I'm going to try to figure that out today, and I'll send you all the working copy of it. Speaking of working copies, as we get started, I'm not going to go through this right now. I'm probably not even going to go through it today, but I sent everyone a thing called Form Example. And this is from a site that I created a while ago, and I just pulled the form out. So I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can see it. All right. So none of these work now except for contact because none of these are included in here. So if you click on any of them, you're going to get an error. All right. But if you look in here, this is a form. Right. And what we have in here, everything that you see here, 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 and here, these first 4 fields, these are known as text areas. I'm sorry. They're known as text boxes. Type text. All right. And there's all sorts of things that you can put in here just to show you. Notice how it says all fields required, and there's an asterisk by each one of those. If I click the button to submit and I don't put anything into those fields, you can see what happens. I get error messages. All right. Now, this is done with a combination of HTML and JavaScript. We haven't really gone into any JavaScript at all yet. So that's why I didn't want to go through the code in this example until at least tomorrow after we go over the chapter on JavaScript. Now, so tomorrow we'll go over chapters, whatever it's left, 16, 17, and 18 or something like that. And that last chapter is on JavaScript. After we go through one chapter that's 40 or 50 pages, you won't be an expert on JavaScript, but you'll get an introduction to what JavaScript is about. So what you see on here is as I start putting in information and I click, you can see that the message goes away. All right. So if I come through here and I keep doing this, all right, now you'll notice those are all filled in. And you notice state field is required. And these are all known as text fields. This is what's called a drop-down list right here. Why? That's why. All right. And you've got the code now for that. So if I come down here and you choose Missouri, so now it doesn't say select your state any longer. It says Missouri. So now that one is okay. You'll notice for a zip code, if I put in 63385, that it accepts it. But if I put a dash in there, which is wrong because I need 4 numbers after it, now I get that it's an invalid format. And if I put 1, 2, 3 because it's expecting 4 numbers, it's still an invalid format. But once I put a 4 in there, now it's valid. All right. In much the same way, this is a cell phone. Notice it says it's required. Well, if I put a number 1 in there, it says it's in an invalid format. But if I put in there 222-222 or 333-4444, okay, now it says all checks passed. All right, I don't know why that isn't clearing out, but it should be, so it is now. All right, so the point is, what we used in order to do this is something I'm going to show you today, and that's what's known as regular expression handling. All right, now the fields down here, the gender, for male and female, that's a radio button field. And that's based off of the old-fashioned radio buttons that used to be in automobiles. All right, back when AM radio was about all you had. And you could press, you had like 5 buttons on a car, and you could press one of them and get a certain radio station. All right, so that's a radio button. This is a radio button as well. And you'll notice as soon as you click one of these, okay, only one can be chosen at a time. These are known as mutually exclusive choices. So you can choose one or the other. On the bottom here, these are called checkboxes. You can choose none of them, any one, or both of them. It doesn't matter. All right. So for instance, let's suppose right here that you were filling out a form that said, that you wanted to work at some company, and they gave you all these fields. All right. And maybe, they're not supposed to typically ask an age and a gender, but let's just say that you could do that. Then down here, if you decided, if you put, for example, what shift do you want to work? And if you had to choose a shift, you'd probably make them radio buttons. But if you put in here, what desired shift, and you put in here, for example, first shift, second shift, third shift, any shift, then you'd probably make them checkboxes. All right, then there's a submit button. And usually, typically, what's going to happen when you click the submit button is it's going to take everything that you put in here and it's going to send it to a server someplace. Literally, it will send it out to a server. All right, with that information on it. That's not part of this class, though. We don't do that. So all I have in here is when you click submit, is that this is a JavaScript alert box that says, hey, all your tests passed. All right. And notice also all the fields, they're still filled in, but there's another button here that says reset. And if I click that, you can see what happens. It resets the form to all of its default values. All right. So kind of keep that in mind as we get going in here. I just wanted you to see that as we get started and really go into, for the first time, the idea of talking about forms. All right. As they mention here, to create dynamic web pages, you use HTML to create the forms. But once you click the submit button, that's where some of the dynamicity comes in. And that's where you need some way to send that material, and you need to send that out to a server someplace. All right. Now, are there ways around that? The answer is actually yes. And we're going to look at some of those as we go on. All right. So as they mention here in this chapter, you learn how to code forms and the controls they contain. Now, I showed you some of these things that are in here, not all of them. All right. Forms, as you'd probably guess, are form tags. All the other stuff that you see in there, buttons, text fields, text areas, etc., they go inside of the form tags. All right. Then we'll get into the CSS that you use for aligning controls, grouping controls, setting a tab order, etc. And then even some more CSS. Now, one of the things that happened with HTML5, the latest and greatest version of CSS, is they have put in some ways that you can add in your in your HTML, you can manually go in and do some of the form validation. There's other ways of doing form validation as well, including regular expressions, which we will look at. Then, as it typically does, all right, pretty much the chapter will not end, but pretty much end with giving you an example of a web page with a form. It is a very extensive example, so we'll look at that in some detail. Then finally, the last thing that's in here are other HTML controls that, depending on what kind of form you create, you may never use these, or you may use them quite a bit. Again, it just depends. So as you can see, this is about a 40-page chapter. So my guess is it'll take till pretty close to the break. And if we finish early, we'll immediately jump in and look at the Halloween exercise for chapter 13. All right, so with that said, let's just get going then. All right, as it says, forms contain controls. All right, the other thing, and you'll see this, but you probably won't really appreciate it until you get into the class next semester. Those of you who are taking the AWD1111 database-driven website development 1 class, then we deal with post and get. All right. For now, they're just something that's going to be in there, and it's really not going to be that important for what we're doing. All right. So as you come in and as you start to build a form, all right, forms will have a lot of things in them. Now it says there the attributes of a form element. All right, notice that the first one is an ID. Well, if I want to do some special styling on a form, all right, one thing I can do is give that form an ID. Now you saw that example, I think I still have it up here. You saw that example that I put up there before, all right, this thing. But if I wanted to do some special things, maybe I wanted to take this form and, make it round, or not round, but maybe round off the corners or do something with it. I could do that by giving the form itself an ID. All right. Action is the thing we really don't get into in this class. And that typically is going to be a file that ends with an extension like dot or period, PHP or .aspx, etc. That's the action that will happen when you click the submit button and everything validates. So in other words, that's going to be the server file that you send the form to. And the last thing that's in there that they show right there are get and post. All right, and kind of look at it this way, that if you're trying to show somebody something, it's a get. If you're trying to let them interact with something, it's a post. All right, now that may or may not make sense to you right now, but hopefully as we go on, it'll make more and more sense to you. All right, so when you create a form, you give it form elements. All right, one of the form elements that we're going to use quite a bit, all right, is going to be, as it says right there, it'll have the type attribute. And notice it says you can put things in there like button and text and checkbox. So by saying type equals, you're letting the system know the type of control that you're actually working with. All right. ID and name, we talked a little bit about. ID is just what we've been doing all semester long, giving a unique ID to something so that you can refer to it typically in CSS. All right. But its ID is on the client side, and that's what this class is about. The AWD1111 class is all about the server side. That's where that name attribute right there comes into. Almost exclusively, name attribute will be used with server side code. All right. If you decide that you want a certain thing on a form to be showing, but that the user cannot interact with it, you can disable it if that's what you want to do. All right. So again, I could have come in here and as an example, maybe originally we had in here like 5 to 10 years old. And now we decide that in this gym site that's right here, that we're not going to allow people in there until they're a certain age. maybe 15 or whatever. So we could either change the button around or we could disable it if we wanted to. All right. And making something read only does just that. You can't change the value. The difference between these two is when something is disabled, it cannot receive the focus. And what that means is you can't click on that field. All right. If something is read only, it can receive the focus, but you can't change the value. All right. Other than that, they're very similar to one another. So we're going to end up creating things like this. So if we look at this example that's here, all right, you can see the code and then you can see the form that basically that form, when you look at it, really they put no styling in there at all. All right. So form ID, as we talked about, equal email form. When you click that subscribe button, it should take your email and send it off using a file called subscribe.php, and it should basically send it off to a server someplace. All right. And because you are interacting with the form directly, the method there is post. If you don't put a method in at all, then the method defaults to get. And we're going to talk more about get and post in just a couple minutes. Then you'll notice we've got a paragraph, nothing new there. Please enter your email address to subscribe to our newsletter. So nothing new there. And then we've got another paragraph with the word email right there. All right. And then what follows that is a text box. The type is text. There's all sorts of things that we can put in here, such as we can set a max length. So for instance, if we wanted the email to be no more than 100 characters, we could set the max length to 100 characters. So there's a lot of different things that we can set up in there. All right. Then we've got just another paragraph, but you'll notice in here, there's another input, type equals submit, ID equals submit, value equals subscribe. So this subscribe button, all right, again, since it's a submit button, that's it'll be equated with the action that takes place in here when you click it. So it'll send it right there. And then there's the ending form tag. Now, if you put something in here, they give an example. So if you said like zach@modulemedia.com in there, this is what would typically get sent then. All right. This is what would get sent when you send this in, for lack of better words. All right. So it says when the form is submitted with the get method, subscribe.php. So that's this. Email equals Zach, the @ is a %40, modulemedia.com is the rest of the email, ampersand means the submit is equal to subscribe. So we press that. And again, that may make very little sense to you right now, and that's really okay. We're going to write one of these in just a little bit. And as I mentioned, tomorrow we'll look in more depth and breadth of coverage with the example that I sent out to you this morning. All right. Now they do mention a couple things in here. It says for the get, you see everything. All right. So in other words, when you do a get, so if I go out here to cnn.com, all right, and now I click this. All right. This is a get. It's showing me that's in here. All right. It is showing me everything. It is putting it through there basically as a get. On the other hand, when you use a post, that's typically, for example, like if you were filling out a form and it asked you for a password or it asked you for a credit card number or personal information, you're almost always then going to use a post. The difference is, one of the differences is, when you use a get, you see the information up in the command line. When you use a post, that information is not shown in the command line. That information is hidden in what are called HTTP or hypertext transfer protocol headers. All right, so you don't see it, and you wouldn't want that information to be up there where somebody else could possibly see that and find out your credit card information and or find out your password, etc. All right, okay. So this probably is one of the most confusing pages in this chapter. And the reason for that is, as they mention here, the next figure shows 5 different types of buttons. That means that you can make buttons in different ways. All right. So the first one, as they say, is a generic button defined by setting the type attribute to button. What does that even mean? That means with this first example right here that says message on it, and it says alert me, this one right here. What this means is if you want something special to happen when you click that button that says alert me, you're going to have to write code yourself to have something happen. All right, because the type there is button. All right, the next one that's in there, the type is submit. So again, with this checkout, the idea is when you click a submit button, the form is typically, I guess that's checkout, but that the form is going to go somewhere. That's the idea behind it. The reset I showed you before, the reset is designed to take the form and take every field in the form and reset it to its default values. That doesn't mean like in here, all right, you notice what it does. So if I go and do this, I'm just going to change these and then click reset. It reset it to everything. So the default value here is female. The default age is 5 to 25. The default reason is get healthy. So reset is resetting those accordingly. If I choose a state and then I click reset, it goes back to select your state. All right. These, the default value is blank. So if I put anything in these and I click the reset, they all go back, whoops, they all go back to being blank. All right. And you can also, when you do this, now here's a styled button. All right. And here's a button that also has an image in it. Now it's interesting that they show you that one because maybe you've seen this today. In fact, I think, for example, if I go out to, let's say, I go out to udemy.com, all right? And let's just, I don't want this, but I'm going to pretend right now that I want this course, all right? I don't, but I'm going to pretend I do. Okay, so I'm going to click on it here, and it brings it up, all right? Well, you'll notice right here when you look, there's my shopping cart. So if I say I want to buy this, if I click buy this course, all right, and then I click, go to cart or whatever here, all right, so I'm going to go to my cart. I'm not going to buy it. All right, I'm not going to click checkout, but notice how this changed. The reason I'm showing you that is, quite often today with things like shopping carts, going to a home page, etc., developers are using icons. They're not using text. So with the example that they showed in the book, I don't want this, so I'm going to remove it. All right, you can see then as soon as I did, boom, it took it out of there. All right, but what's happening today is a lot of times with buttons, they're just images. Not always, but quite often. All right. So the takeaways here is there are several ways to create buttons. If you say that the type is button, that means you will have to write code to make that button actually do something when it's clicked. That's what we're going to be getting into when we get into the JavaScript portion of the class. All right. When the type is submit, there really should only be one submit button that's connected to a form. All right. Then you're typically trying to place. When the type is reset, you're resetting things to their default values. And that pretty much is it. Now it says on the very bottom here in the bottom bullet, you can use the button type to run a client-side script. That means JavaScript that validates the form data. Then if the data is valid, the script can submit the form to the server. Now, you might say, well, big deal. It's a real big deal. And the reason that this is a real big deal is typically what happens. So if I've got this, let's suppose I put nothing in here as far as validating it. And I left all these fields blank, had these, be the defaults, and I click submit. So if I don't have any validation that I put into the form, it just sends it right out to the server. Then the server's got to look at it and say, hey, wait a minute, there's no first name, there's no last name, address, city, state, etc. So it's got to send it back to me on the client side. That is making extra work for the server, and that's considered very poor practice. So what happens is you, as a developer, put in validation checks on the client side. If everything passes, you send the form off to the server. And guess what? The server runs a lot of the same validation checks that you just ran. And you might listen to that and go, why would it do that if I just validated it? Because it is possible for people to turn off JavaScript on their computers. And if they turn it off, they can send things out without having it be validated with JavaScript. That doesn't happen often, all right? But sometimes if you're testing or doing whatever, you might choose to do that. It's possible is what I'm saying. All right. So text fields and text areas. What's the difference between them? A text field is a single line long. A text area is multiple lines. So as they show right here, typically if you were to come in and ask somebody for comments, or if you ask somebody, I've given this example before where maybe you're going to a doctor's office for the first time and they ask you to fill out a form. And then down here, they might ask for hobbies or interests, all right, type of thing, where there would be multiple lines long. So what's the big difference? If you create a text field like this, all right, if you notice right here, there's no ending tag. All right, it's type equal text. We'll go over the other ones in just a minute. But in here, this says username, and it's a text field. The type is text. The ID is username. They did not even give it a name property. They could have, but they didn't. All right. And it says autofocus, which means that when the form first comes into play, that field, this one here, will automatically have the cursor there. All right. Then we've got another field. The type is password. What that means in here is when you start typing that in, it's going to probably show as kind of big black dots. You won't be able to see the password as you're typing it in, and notice too, the max length is 6. That means that's the biggest number of characters you're going to allow the user to put in. Then there's a placeholder, and what that placeholder does, as you can see on your screen, is it takes the text, and it's that text that's in there, it's temporary text. It's a light gray, and as soon as you take your mouse and you click on this field and start typing, that'll go away. If you remove everything that was in the password field, the enter your password will come back. All right. And then finally, we've got a field in here where the type is hidden. And guess what? A hidden field is hidden. It's not shown as it is right here. That said, if you create a field that you say is hidden, so let's say we had a hidden field in here. We don't. But if you go in and you right mouse click and you view your page source, hidden fields are still shown in here. All right. They're just not shown in here on the form itself. So why would you want that? Well, as an example, let's say that I go out to my local pizza parlor, all right? And I go in and I go out and I order a pizza. And it shows me the cost of the pizza, then it shows me the cost of the tax, then it shows me the final total. Well, something like the tax rate might be a hidden field. There's really no reason for me to see what the tax rate is. So when you've got fields that you might need to use in a form, or probably do need to use in a form, but you don't want to display them, you make them hidden. All right. Now, the only thing I want to mention to you is if you notice right here, they're using username, password, hidden, etc. All right. These things technically are what are referred to as labels, but they haven't made them labels yet. They're talking about the stuff that goes into the form, but they're going to add the concept of labels very soon. All right. And what's the difference? I'll show you when we get there. All right. So here's again, there's a text area. When you set up a text area, you can do it in one of two ways. Notice what they have here. They have a height and they have a width. So that height, 5 ems, is this, and that width of 25 ems is this. All right. You could have also set this up again in pixels if you wanted to, although typically that wouldn't be done. But you can also set that up in here. Sometimes people do this where you say rows equal and cols equal. All right. And rows and columns are basically going to be, again, how wide and how high they are. Okay. All right. Next, we have radio buttons, check boxes, and now they'll put in labels. And again, the main difference between a checkbox and a radio button choices are mutually exclusive. So that's these. Checkboxes are not mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive means only one can be chosen at a time. Non-mutually exclusive means that you can choose any combination. None, in this case, any one or both. And for labels, those are just basically tags that you put on to explain what a field is. So if you look at the example, these are all labels: first name, last name, city, state, etc. Now, in here, if you look, there is placeholder text in there. I put in placeholder text to show the zip code should be one of those two formats. Here, I put in placeholder text to show that, again, the phone should be this format. Notice what happens as soon as I click into the zip code field. And as soon as I type my first character, that placeholder text goes away. But when I remove it so it's empty, the placeholder text comes back again. So it can be a nicety, all right, to let users know, all right, because if I come in here and I put in this, right now, that's actually illegal. All right, so if I click this, all right, you'll notice it didn't even get down this far, but if it did, it wouldn't like this because it's expecting the phone number to be put in a certain way. All right. So they're going to explain these now, I guess, demo them. Okay. Radio buttons and check boxes, even though they're different, they share a lot of the same properties. What do I mean? They both have a type radio or type checkbox. They both typically have an ID. They both typically have a name. They both have a value. And if you want them to be checked, you can put in the word checked. All right. So when you look in here now, what you'll notice is if we look at this first example right here, notice there's now labels. All right. And if we look in here at what this is the first one. We're asking what kind of crust you would like: a thin crust, a deep dish, or a hand tossed. So this thing that just says crust, that's this. All right, that's just that right there. But then if you look, we've got radio buttons. And a key thing, what you must understand with radio buttons, what you must understand, the name must be the same. Name is crust, name is crust, name is crust, but the IDs must be different. This is the first time where we've really looked at something where we've got both a name and an ID, and they haven't been the same thing. All right. But with what that does, by giving them all the same name, is it creates what's typically referred to as a radio button group. So now they are, for lack of better words, connected to one another. So you can click the button that says thin, or you can click the button that says deep, or you can click the button that says hand, but only one of them can be clicked. They default the one that's going to be chosen using the word checked. So checked can only be associated with one of these because, again, they're mutually exclusive. So you can have only one type of crust, but you can have 0, 1, 2, or 3 toppings in this example. So with the second example, it's a checkbox. Notice in the checkbox example, the name is different every time. Then here, the name and the ID are the same. Now they kept this simple with just pepperoni, mushrooms, and black olives. That said, if you've got, some pizza places that I know of have 20 or 30 toppings. All right. They just kept it small so you can see everything that's going on here. But again, the takeaway is radio button group name is this. Technically, there is no such thing as a checkbox group because the names are all different. And that's pretty much what they say in here. All right. Labels, as it says, are related to input elements by the for attribute. So notice this, every label that's here, every one of these, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they all say for equals, then it's the name here. It's the name that we're using. Who cares? All right, I'll tell you why you should care. All right, I'll tell you right now then why you should at least possibly care. All right, there we go. All right, oops, sorry, I'm trying to minimize that. There we go. All right. When you've got a for in there and you say for equals, what that means is if you click on the label, in this case, it'll highlight that button. If you click on the label in this case, it'll highlight here the radio button. Here, it'll highlight the checkbox item. It's a little bit of a shortcut. You also have your choice. You'll notice that they put the label after this. They could have put the label first if they wanted to, but they've got the buttons and then they've got the name. They've got the check boxes and then they've got the name. All right. All right. Drop down lists and list boxes. The hardest one is the one I showed you. And that is this one. And it's actually, this one's got, I think, at least either 52 or 53. You'll notice the District of Columbia is in there. And I think that is the only one. I know I had another one that had Puerto Rico in there. All right, so this is going to have 51 entries. So you could choose the District of Columbia. All right. So when you are working with these, well, let's see what's in there. First, it says size, the number of items to display in the control. The default is 1. Multiple, a Boolean attribute, which means it's going to be Boolean means true or false. It determines whether multiple items can be selected. Well, think about this. If we're going through this example right here, all right, this is going to be set to 1, isn't it? You only have one state that you're in. All right. So with this particular drop-down list, it's set up that you either have selected nothing, which is that, or you can select any one of the 50 states or the District of Columbia. All right, so multiple wouldn't pertain here. All right, but there's other times you might want to let a user choose multiple things. Now, if we look at this example that's here, all right, you're only, for the New Yorker, you can see that, well, with both these types of pizza, they come in 3 different styles, 10-inch, 12-inch, or 16-inch. So you've got really 6 possibilities here. A New Yorker at 10, 12, or 16 inches, a Chicago at 10, 12, or 16 inches. So that's how they've set it up. But what this is right here is it's typically referred to as a drop-down list. You get a select, and it's filled with different options. In this case, we've got 2 sets of options, one set here and one set here. And those options can be broken up, like it says right here. You can add an option group with a label that identifies what these are. So the one labeled or the one opt group says the New Yorker, the other one says the Chicago. All right. Values. All right. And it says the value of the selected option. All right. And finally, selected, which is the one, if you want one selected when the page is loaded, you can set it up that way. Now, I'm going to say something that may make little sense to you right now, but it's important that you realize this as we go on. If I look at this example right here, all right, I'm not going to worry about filling in any form. In fact, let me reset that. All right. But if I look right here, let's suppose that, we're writing this form for Rankin. So 99% of the time, we're going to be using here Missouri. If we wanted to, then instead of setting the state to select your state, we could set the checked value to Missouri. Then it would default. So whenever it came up, it would look like that. And you can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. All right. If it was Amazon, for example, I wouldn't do that because you never know what state somebody is coming from. But sometimes, at least, it might make sense to do that. All right. Well, but what I want to mention to you, and like I said, this might not make a lot of sense, is typically what's going to happen when you fill out this form and boom, you go and click submit and you send it off to a server. Then what's going to happen is it's going to take the information about you and it's going to put it in a database, an electronic type of information holder, for lack of better words. All right. Why am I telling you this? Because typically what's going to happen is rather than putting in Missouri, which is like, I don't know, 9 letters, 8 letters, something like that, I guess 8 letters, that will probably be put in there as MO. So even though it's displaying as Missouri, when you go and save it, the chances are really good it's going to save as MO. Why? Because that's taking 6 less characters. And when you've got something like Massachusetts, and I don't know how many letters are in there, I don't care. But there's probably 12 or 13 letters in there. All right. And if I can have MA versus Massachusetts, plus it's harder to screw up MA than it is Massachusetts. So that's the way it'll go into a database. This might very well go into a database as DC. All right. And the reason, again, that means it's going to be taking up less storage. MO versus Missouri, DC versus District of Columbia, etc. All right. Now, this example right here, this example, okay, this is known as, again, it's more a list box than it is a drop-down list. Why am I telling you that? Because you'll notice right here, it's set up so you can choose more than one thing. This, you can only choose one thing at a time. So if I wanted to order 3 different pizzas, and I'd have to go in and click it and then bring it up again and click it and then bring it up again and click it. Here, I can select no toppings, any 1, any 2, any 3, or all 4. And the reason that I can select multiples is we added the multiple thing right here. So as it says here, drop-down lists and list boxes allow a user to select items. All right. Now, right here, they're showing a scroll bar. If we had 20 or 30 items, we can basically dictate how many we want to have shown at any one time. All right. And then we'd have to scroll through to find more. All right. Okay, the number, the email, the UR, and the tell commands. Some of these we've talked about, most of them we have not. The number command is kind of funky. And what I mean by that is if you set up a type of number like this, okay, what it's saying is it's expecting whatever you put in there to be numeric. It's expecting the smallest amount you're going to put in there is 100. It's expecting the largest amount you're going to put in there is 1,000. All right. It also expects that the numbers that you put in, or the numbers that it will show, will be 100, then step to 200, then step to 300, all the way to 1,000. And it'll assume the default value is 300. All right. So that's an example of using number. Now, why I said it's a little funky, all right, it actually puts it in there as a numeric control. So if you come in and you try to put in a field that's number and you try to put in letters, it won't take it. However, the minimum there is 100. If you manually type in, let's say 1 million, it'll take it. All right, so you can override it is what I'm telling you. All right, email does just that. It's going to assume that your email is correctly formatted, meaning there's an @ sign, and after the @ sign, there's some verbiage, and after that verbiage, there's a dot something or other. All right. URL is expecting that either it's going to start with HTTP or HTTPS or FTP. All right. And tell, okay, is assuming that what you're putting in there is a phone number. These are not great examples. All right. But you can see with that number that I showed you, there's the 300. Every time you click the up arrow, if I click it again, it goes to 400 all the way to 1,000. If I click the down arrow, it'll go to 200. If I click it again, it'll go to 100, and then it'll only go up after that. All right. So as it says, these controls are good for semantics because somebody should be able to look at them and figure out how they're used. Some of that is going to be validated by the browser. All right, but as it says, the numbers and the phone numbers are not validated. All right, so for instance, if I put in here for a phone number 000-0000, and that's the pattern it wanted, that's not a legal phone number, but that's not what this is validating. It's just validating that with what I put in there, was it put in there right syntactically? So if it says number, dash, number, it could care less about what those numbers are. All right. All right, date and time controls. Maybe you've seen these before, where you can basically set up date pickers like this. They're very popular. I mean, especially if you go out to your doctor's office and an appointment, or I've done this already when I try to schedule maintenance work on my car, type of an idea. And you can typically pick a day like this. Then you can come in and pick a time, etc. But hopefully they're pretty self-evident as far as setting up a month, a week, etc. All right. As it says, there's a max and a min, the maximum value that may be entered, the minimum value that may be entered. And a lot of times what people will set up for a max is maybe a year from the current date. So for instance, I could set up a an appointment a year from now, but I couldn't set it up any more than that. And a lot of times min will default to the current date. All right. So I couldn't make an appointment for someplace last week. It wouldn't make any sense. All right. Couple of other skills here, as it says, for working with forms. All right. And they say how to align controls. Well, let's look. All right. That looks pretty nice. How did they do that? They used some CSS. Notice the labels float left. All right. They all had a certain width and the text align was right. That's why they all line up on the right with a text align. All right. If you didn't align them that way, if you floated them left, everything would be lined up here. So address, city, and state would be pushed way over. This is not the only way that you can do this. All right. For instance, we've set the width to a certain size. All right. And there, you can float them. Let's just put it this way. This is a popular way of doing it. All right. And you'll notice up here, they've got autofocus by first name, which means that when the form comes up, that's the field that's going to have the focus. That's where your cursor will be. All right. This register would be a submit button, and the reset is what we looked at before. All right. So as it says there, if a form includes a series of controls and labels that identify them, you can align them by floating them to the left and then setting width. All right. A series of labels is typically more readable if the labels are aligned to the right. All right. Again, if you don't agree with that, or you're building something for somebody who does not agree with that, of course you could change those. All right. You can group controls. I did not do this in my example, but you could use what's called a field set, and that field set can have a legend. Very simple when you look at the pictures here. This is the field set. That's the box that's around here. The legend here is crust. The legend here is toppings. All right. Everything that you want in the field set goes between beginning and ending field set tags. And if you want a legend, it typically comes right after the opening field set tag. All right. Not really a lot more you can say about that. Tab order, especially people who have been using computers for many, many years, quite often like to be able to go through different things by just hitting their tab key. So what you can do is we could set this up, for example, we could set the tab order up where that was 1, that was 2, and that was 3, which meant if I'm here and I hit tab, I automatically go there. If I hit tab again, I automatically go there. Now with a form this small, that's not really that big a thing. But if you get a really big form, it can be pretty important. You can make it easier for people to work their way around. Access keys, notice here, the F is underlined, the L is underlined, and the E is underlined. So the way they're setting these up is if you hold down and do a control F, it'll put you here. If you do a control L, it'll put you here. If you do a control E, it'll put you there. All right. You never, ever have to use these. However, as it says right there, it makes it more accessible for users who can't use a mouse. It can provide a fast way of getting around for some users. All right. I guess on the Windows, they say Alt Shift. I thought it was Control. All right. We're not going to play much with them anyway. All right, let's look at the features for data validation, then we'll take a break. So as it says, these are relatively new features that have been put in. Some of these you might think are great. Some of these you might think are terrible. What do I mean? I want to show you autocomplete. All right, notice if I click in here, there's autocomplete. All right, if I do it here, I get different things. There's autocomplete. If I do it here, there's different things and they're autocomplete. You can turn autocomplete off. All right. And sometimes people like to do that. So you have to enter something all the time. Other people like to leave that on because it can make it faster and easier for people to fill out a form. So as it says, you can set this to off to tell the browser to disable auto completion. Required literally means just that. So I don't know if I put those in here or not. Let's take a quick look. All right. If you look here, for example, at first name, okay, it does not have in there the word required. All right. So why am I telling you that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this quickly. So I want to take us to our break, but I'm going to come back here and I'm going to open up this form example and I'm going to make a quick change to it. All right. So I'm going to grab this field that says first name right here, right there. And I'm going to put on the end, whoops, I want to move that over. I want to put in the word required. And you notice it's red, meaning that it's recognizing it as a keyword. So that's all I put there was required. Now notice when I come back up and run this again, okay, and I click submit, you get that message. Please fill out this field because it's a required field. All right. Earlier, we didn't get that. We got a different message saying that it was a required field, but I had to programmatically put that in. All right. There's a no validate, which as it says, again, it's Boolean. Boolean means true or false. All right. And it tells the user not to validate that control. You're not going to probably use that very often. All right. And then there's form no validate, which says don't validate anything on the form. And they give you some examples in here. Now, notice what they've done. They're saying that any field in here, you can use these pseudo classes. Notice they've changed the color. So if name, zip, and phone are required and you don't put them in, you can make those fields turn red. And that's what they're talking about in here. Notice by default, autocomplete is on for all browsers. So if you don't want it, you have to turn it off like they show right here. Autocomplete equals off. All right, this is a good place, I think, to stop. It's 9:02. Let's come back at 9:15, and we're going to pick it up with regular expressions. I'll see you in 13 minutes. All right, let's start back up again. And the next section is on regular expressions. And in a nutshell, regular expressions are pattern matching. So if you're looking for something, in other words, does the zip code contain either 5 digits or 5 digits and a hyphen and 4 digits? Does the phone number contain 3 digits, a hyphen, 3 digits, a hyphen, and 4 digits? Type of things like that. So the idea is when you do a pattern match, it either succeeds or it fails. Now, a long time ago, I went and Googled this regular expression, and I found this site, which is really an ugly site. All right. And it is literally, it's right here. So you can just put in regular expressions.info. So let me make this bigger. So you can just put, and again, the site isn't pretty, but it's got everything I've ever needed to know about regular expressions. Notice there's a quick start, there's a full tutorial, there's all sorts of stuff in here, and they even break it down by languages. So if I come in here for language and I want to know something for JavaScript, I can come in there and boom. Now there's using regular expressions with JavaScript. All right. So as we look at this, again, it is pattern matching. All right. So there's different ways that you can do this, but what they show you here are some patterns. Now, I don't expect this to totally make sense to you, but I'm going to explain it to you anyway. What this says right here, if you look, there's a bracket here, then it says AZAZ09, then it says 6, comma. In English, what that means is this, whatever you put in for this, let's say it's a password, so it can contain lowercase letters, uppercase letters, or numbers, a minimum of 6. And in this case, there is no maximum. Then we get a zip code. The \D5 means 5 digits. Then everything else is inside of parentheses with a question mark, which means 5 digits or 5 digits, a hyphen, and 4 digits. The phone number, 3 digits, a hyphen, 3 digits, a hyphen, and 4 digits, etc. And there's all sorts of these that you can set up. All right, some of them are quite complex. For instance, with dates. All right, they've got in here month, day, year format. Yeah, but there's all sorts of things because different months have different numbers of days in them, leap years, etc. And we'll talk about some of that stuff as we continue on. All right. But they're showing an example there, and you can see it's very similar to the example I showed you where the zip didn't match the requested format. All right. And notice again, we're going to see this again when we come to the JavaScript and jQuery book. So this is just an introduction to this stuff. All right. And you're going to see more of it as we go on. So this example that's in here, this web page with a form, it's a really good example when you look at it. When you look at the stuff that's in here, you'll notice a few things. First of all, they've used 3 different field sets, 4 different ones. One here, one here, one here, and one here. Each field set has a legend and has X number of fields in it. The majority of the fields that are in it are of type text. Now that would be type email. That would be type password. That would be type password, but that would be text, 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 etc. Now here, notice for state, they're asking for a 2-character code. They're expecting that you know your code. They could have just the same way that we came in here and did this. I could have made this real small, and I could have had in here, just like we had at the top, select a state, then I could have had A, L, A, K, A, Z, A, whatever they are. We could have just put in abbreviations as well. So as it says, the forms on this page use many of the HTML controls we've been talking about. The form validation here is done by using a combination of required attributes. So the word required, as I showed you, some regular expressions, and that control that says email. The autofocus means that that's going to be the first one that gets the focus. In other words, when the program starts, that's the field that'll have the mouse in it. And the placeholder text, you can see for state, it says 2-character code. Zip, it says 5 or 9 digits, etc. Phone number's got one. The easier you make it for someone to fill out a form, the better the chance they're going to fill it out, period. If you make it too difficult, they'll just say, screw it, this isn't worth my time. All right. But if you can help them, all right, make it as simple as possible, the chances are better that they will fill it out. All right. I should mention too, before we look at the HTML, all right, like I said, I would strongly suggest this site. Another one I found that's much more simplistic is this one. It's called html5pattern.com. I use it occasionally for different things, such as, well, how about a phone number? Boom. There's a phone number. They've got them for different countries. There's the USA phone number. So again, that's expecting the dashes. Put in there 111-222-3333, and I check it. Says it submitted, it passed. But if I try putting it in the wrong way, so I put that in parentheses like that, says it doesn't match the requested format. You can put in multiple patterns if you want to or need to do so. All right, the more you put in, the more you're going to key in, the more complex it's going to be, because now rather than checking for one thing, you might be checking for 2 or 3 or whatever types of things. All right, so the HTML for this, again, they show you in the mustard what's new. And you'll notice that, for example, for the password, they've got that pattern that I just mentioned to you. Lowercase letters or uppercase letters or numbers, any combination thereof, there has to be at least 6 of them. That's known as alphanumeric because it's either alphabetic or it's numeric. Now, those dashes that are in there, those are just delimiters. You cannot put a hyphen in there. That means anything from A to Z. If for some reason you put A through P in there instead of A through Z, then you couldn't have any passwords that had a Q, R, S, T all the way through Z. Don't know why you do that, but you could. All right. Another pattern down here, again, for the zip code, pattern here for the phone number. Here, notice they're using type of date, type of number. All right. The CSS is, as you'd probably guess, this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, because this is where they're prettying things up. So they're setting up the field set, they're setting up the legend, etc. They're floating the labels left, they're giving all the labels a certain width, and aligning the text to the right, so it looks a little bit nicer. Notice for the required fields, as it says right there, that means that if you leave off a required field, it's going to come back and it's going to have a 3-pixel solid red border around any field that you said was required that you didn't fill it in. All right. If everything's valid, it should have a 1-pixel solid black around it. And if it's an invalid, all right, it says box shadow none. So it should basically not look, like it has anything there. All right. The chapter ends then, the last 10 or so pages, with some HTML controls that I mentioned earlier you might use a lot or you might never use depending on the type of site you're creating. So here's one. If you want to be able to put a search control into a form. All right. So notice how you do that. In here, in this search control, when you put something in there and you tell it to search, you have to tell it where to search. So you'll notice the domains in here, they're just, and they're telling it to search Muroc site. So as it says there, if you want to implement a search function, you use an HTML form to submit the text. Within there, you can use an input element, and you follow the search control with a submit button. All right. There are other ways of doing this as well. Some of these ways, depending on the language you're using, etc., are much easier to use than the example that they're showing here. All right, the file upload control is just that. You know, if you want to be able to bring up a file or do something, you can do this. And it's more complex than what they're showing in the example here. And what I mean is, you know, you've got control over where you want to let it search for files, the type of files that you want to let it search for. So for instance, under this attach an image, you might want to set it up so that the only files you see are .jpeg or .gif or .ping or .webp or .avif files. All right, as opposed to searching ones that you know are not images. So again, there's a lot of different ways this can be done. The color, the range, the progress, and the meter control. The color control does just that. This is literally known as bringing up a color picker, and that's what you're doing. So why would you do that? I mean, I've already gone out to sites where they let you customize it. So if you want, you can set a background color to whatever color you'd like. You can set a text color for any color you'd like. That can be really nice for people who, you know, with a lot of sites, if you make the background color too close to the text color, it can make it very hard for people who are colorblind to be able to discern or tell the difference where one ends and one starts. All right, so that'd be an example of where you could use that. Here's a range control. All right, again, an example. Now this meter control, believe it or not, I see a lot of these that people will put in, for example, into their portfolio. All right, when they put their knowledge down and they've got like HTML, then they've got CSS, and then they've got JavaScript. And if they think they know a lot about HTML, maybe they move this so it's 98%. For CSS, they know pretty much it's 80%. For JavaScript, maybe it's 50%, something like that. All right. Other ways that these meter types of things can be used that you might have seen before. All right. If you've ever gone out to a site where they're doing a fundraiser and they're showing the percentage of what they've raised so far and stuff like that. Sometimes you see it with things like that as well. All right. A data list and an output control. All right. The idea with a data list in here where it says, what is your preferred search engine? All right. If I type in an O, let's say, for example, it can find Google, which has got an O in it, and Yahoo. All right. So there's just different ways that you can do this. The output control, maybe you've seen this before. This is in lieu of like using what's called a CAPTCHA, where you have to sit there and say like, which of these pictures has a stoplight in it. Sometimes what you do to make sure that the person looking at your site is a human is you ask a question like this. All right, so you ask them to enter a couple numbers, put in a total, and etc. So there's different ways, again, this can be used. And that's it for the chapter. So let's jump into and see what we have to do here. All right, chapter 13. In this exercise, we're going to create a that includes this form right here. Pretty simple form. First name and last name will both be typed text. All right. Email will be typed email. Zip code, all right, we'll expect it to be in a certain format, and then we've got a subscribe button. If you fill out everything correctly and you click subscribe, it should come back and show you this. These are two different forms. This is an email form. This is a subscribe form. All right. So we're going to make both of them, and there's really not going to be that much to them. All right. We're going to copy our original form. But if you notice in here where it says join email, the one right here, that's the one that's going to bring this up. Clicking this button is going to bring this one up. The reason I'm telling you that is we're going to build both of these right under our root node, or right now where we have the index.html. All right, so as we look at this, for the email form, notice there's a few here. All right, so let's look. Create a new page named email in the root folder, then copy the code. We'll just copy our index.html. All right, modify the horizontal margin so that it indicates that the email is the current page. I don't care really about that. Create a new style, so we'll make an email.css. We'll copy over our main.css, and we'll make our modifications in here, basically to style that particular form that we're going to create. Then for the subscribe, we will create a new page named subscribed. So we'll probably what we'll do is just copy the HTML and we'll put it into subscribe.html. All right, we'll create another style sheet called subscribe.css. All right, and there's not much we have to do here. Okay, so let's go in and start doing this. So I'm going to begin by opening up my homework folder. And the last one that we did in here was 12. We're doing 13 now. So I'm going to come in and copy. And I'm going to copy and paste. And this will become chapter 13. All right. And I'm going to immediately open up chapter 13 inside of Visual Studio Code. All right. Then the first thing I'm going to do to try to make my life a little bit easier is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take this index.html file, copy it, and then right down here, I'm just clicking in where it's blank, and I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to do it again. And this first one here, I'm going to rename it as email.html. And the second one here, I'm going to rename this as subscribe.html. So I now have those two files in there. There's email and there's subscribe. All right. In addition, I'm going to open up my styles menu here. And again, I'm going to take my main right there, main, and I'm going to copy that. And I want to paste that, but I want to make sure it goes inside of here. So I'm going to paste. There it is. And I'm going to paste it again. All right. So I'm going to paste it one more time in here. And I'm going to change the name of this one to email.css. And I'm going to change the name of this one to subscribe.css. So now I've got all four of the files I need in here. Right now, basically none of them are doing what I want them to do, but I've got those done. So I'm going to start with email.html. All right, I'm going to close that and start working. All right. So all this looks good. Let's see. Well, this main RWD, I'm just going to change that to email.css because right now they're the same file. All right. And you know what? Just in case, I think what I'll do is I'm going to copy this. And now I'll put email.css in here. All right. I'm also going to come in. This is our email file, so I don't need to add the subscribe stuff. I'll add that later to subscribe.html. All right, I'm going to leave all this in there. I'm going to leave the pumpkin stuff, everything that's in there, all of this stuff, I'm going to leave in there. All right. I'm going to even leave my section stuff in here. All right. And let's see, what else do I want to do here? In fact, I think I'm going to get rid of the section and put my form in there probably. Yeah, I think we'll do that. So let's get rid of everything in this section. So again, right now it's empty. And this is where we will put the form. All right. And in fact, underneath that form, we're going to end main. There'll be no aside in here or anything else. We were told to make this really, really, really simplistic. So let me put the ending section tag, which I removed. Okay, so right now, not a whole heck of a lot in this. All right, so again, we've come in here and I'm not even going to use this main.rwd. Maybe I'll need it. So what I'll do is I'll comment it out like that. But I don't think I'm going to need it. So there. I'm just going to have my normalize and I'm going to have my email. In fact, this is such a simple one. I'm going to even remove all the slick nav stuff. I shouldn't need it. All right, and I don't need that ending script tag because I don't have a beginning one. So that's pretty simple for my head. All right, and let's just come down into here in the body. Again, we'll have this for the little goblin and all of us, etc. We'll keep our nav menu in here. All right. We'll keep our email in here. We're at our main level, so we do not need a .. / in here. All right. Okay, so we put in our nav menu. Let's see. After this nav menu, and I may have removed it already, so I'll put it back in. I will put in an aside here that has my nav list because I think it showed it. So I'll put in an aside right here. In fact, I want to put that under main. All right, this is going to be short, so it'll just take a minute to add. Now, remember, I told you this before, that you can come in here and there's shortcuts. And I said how you can say, for example, like .hello, and it makes a div with a class of hello. What happens if you do this and I put in # hello? Notice it makes a div with an ID of that. All right. Just so you know, again, as I think of these things, try to give you a couple of shortcuts, but we want a nav in here. So now what happened here? Nav ID equal nav list. For some reason, there. All right, just a few lines. So this will be an unordered list, which again will be filled with list items. I'm going to copy this and make the changes. So this one will be costumes. Special effects. And masks. All right, that's it for our aside. So now let's go to the section. This is where we're going to put our form. We're going to start with just an H1 tag that says, please enter the following information. And now we'll put in our form, not a real large form, 10 or 15 lines. I'm going to go over all of it in just a minute. I can put this over multiple lines, make it a little easier to read. And yes, I could turn on word wrap if I wanted to. I just want to do it this way. So, all right. And again, I'm just following. This is very, very, very simplistic, the way that this is being done. So there was our first field. Let's just, oh, crud. Let's just copy it and we'll put in another one. Why, oh, geez, Louise. I don't know why it does that, but it does. All right, so our first one is first name. Then we'll have another one in here that will be last name. It's giving me errors because I can't have the same name twice. So this will be last name. As will this. As will this. Now I can't say autofocus again because I can only have one field with the focus, but I can require it like we're doing right here. All right, so that's our second field. We also want email and zip code for two more fields in here. All right, so we've got email. Now this won't be type text like the other ones. This will be type email, and its name can be email, as will its ID be email. All right. And then finally, we have the zip code. This one, again, if you don't remember, this one actually has a little bit more in it because it has a little bit of regular expression handling in it. And the type is not zip, the type is text. All right, we're not done though. Why? Because we haven't put any regular expression handling in here or anything else. We will have a placeholder in here. And that's going to say optional but appreciated. And then we just will expect them to put it in like that. All right, so that'll be a placeholder. And then we need a pattern. All right, and the simplest pattern, we only want 5 digits, so it's \D, which means that what follows is a digit, and we want 5 of them. All right, we'll also put a title in here that says format must be 99999, something like that. All right, that's almost everything. The only thing that we've got left in here is our submit button. All right, now that's everything. So let's take a second and go back. First of all, it's going to look real ugly because it's not styled at all, but that's okay. I'm going to save it anyway, and I'm going to bring it up. All right, so again, it's not styled, but again, it's not terrible. All right, you can kind of tell what's in here. That looks wrong. I mean, it looks like that should be bigger, etc. All right, and this isn't going to go anywhere. Point as we go back in here and look at this, let's take it from the top. Now, this, for lack of better words, this is a hack or a kludge. What this means is typically the action that you put in for a form sends it off to a server. We're not sending it to a server. We're sending one HTML file to another HTML file. And we're doing that because we're not working with server-side code yet in this program. So this says when we click the subscribe or the submit button, we want it to bring up the subscribe.html file. That's what we're saying. All right. Well, and if you look here, I spelled that wrong. Okay, the name of our form is going to be email form. Some people use this. Some people do it like this. All right. Just pick whichever way that you're most comfortable with, but do everything that way. All right. I tend to use the other one, but I did it this way. So we'll have a first name in here. It'll be a text. Its ID and its name are both first name. It'll have the focus when the form comes up, it'll have the cursor in there and it's a required field. Then we have last name, again, another text field. Its name and ID are both last name and it's required. We've got email. Notice the type is email. The name and ID are also email, and again, it's required. Finally, we've got zip, and zip actually is not required. It says it's appreciated, but not required. All right, optional, but appreciated. So where I had in there required, I wouldn't want that in there. But, all right, again, you'll notice as we look in here, the type is text, the name and ID are zip. We put that little grayish text in there that will say optional, but appreciated. 99999. The pattern is 5 digits. The title, if we put our mouse over on it, should say format must be 99999. Then our submit button. Okay, so that's everything that's in here. So let me save. And now let me go over and bring up email.css. All right. Now I'm going to see how little I can change in here. Again, we talked about this before. We don't need a Z index anymore. But I'm going to see if we can basically leave virtually everything in here the way it is. Everything. I'm going to just keep going down. Again, I'll get rid of Anything that's been commented out, I'll get rid of. All right. I'm going to leave, like I said, it may not look perfect, but I don't want to do a lot of work in here other than I want to do some work when we go down and we get to the actual when we get to the actual form itself. All right. Now, one thing I have to check, and I'm pretty sure it's already said, but again, so we have set it up for email.css. May not sound like a big thing, but it's pretty important that we do that. All right. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to get down to my section area in email.css. All right. And again, I don't need any of this stuff anymore, but I'm just leaving it all in there. There's the aside. There's my section code. All right. Looks okay. All this stuff looks all right. H1, that looks okay. That first letter, we don't really care. The H2 should be all right. All right. The H3, the section, but let's come in and style our form here. All right. There's not a lot that we have to put in. Well, we've got labels. We were already told with labels that we should float them to the left. We should give them a width. Oh, let's try about 6 rem might be okay. And let's text to line right. Now, all I've done right here in here is just the labels. Okay. File, and I'm going to do a save, and I'm going to go back and look in here at our email.html, and you can see it's already looking better. Things are lined up. Again, not perfect. We're not done yet, but it already looks better, I think, at least than it did previously. All right, so let's finish this up. All right, so we've done our labels. After our labels, let's do our input areas. So that's going to be basically anything of type text or of type email, or if we had it of type password. Let's give it a little bit of margin. All right. And then finally, let's do our buttons. But before we do that again, let's save and let's take a look at it. All right. Now it's looking pretty good. We didn't do the button yet, but the rest of it actually, I think at least, looks decent. All right. We could make this bigger if we wanted to, because I don't know, with a real long email, you know, something like that, it looks like it would be plenty big. But let's go and style our button. So we've come in, and all the styling we've done so far has been for the label, float left, width of 6 rem, text align right. With our input, margin left 1 rem, margin bottom 0.5 rem, width of 20 rem. So let's do our button. This was supposed to be orange as far as its background color, and I don't know what the thing is for orange. So let's see, it's FFA 500. So again, in here for the button, we've given it some top margin to pull it away so it's not butted up against the the bottom form field. We gave it some margin left to move it over to the right a little bit. Gave it a width, a background color of orange, and a border around it. And there it is. It looks like I didn't move that over enough. All right. So we can give it more left margin. That's not a big thing. And it's not moving for whatever reason. So let's look. I know what it is. And that is, if you remember, all right, when we were putting this in, all right, it's not button, it's got to be pound button because we gave it an ID of button. So don't know if that'll change anything or not. It should. All right, well, the gray is there. It still isn't moving over, and I'm not sure why. All right, but it's kind of set right there. I don't think this will work, but we can try. Let's see. No, that still didn't move it. So I'd have to sit and think about it for a bit to figure out how to move that over. But the rest of it, I think, looks pretty good right now. All right. And I'll let you figure out if you can, what do we want to do? Well, we can always come in here and just Google how to center a button on a form using CSS. Well, they're using a top left position absolute. Well, they say try a margin 0 auto. We can do that. So let's come over here. Well, that'll ruin our margin top. But let's see if we just put that in, what happens. Still didn't move. So again, I'd have to look at that. But now what we want to have happen is when we click that button, we want it to bring up our subscribe. So notice that's working. So if I put in my first name, and I should get the same message, you need to fill in a last name. All right. Need an email. And optional, but appreciated. So we can again put in 63385, I believe it is, and click subscribe. Now this isn't working because we haven't implemented that page yet. All right. But everything else is okay. And I still don't know what the problem is with that. I'll look at it during our next break. All right. So we've got that done. So let's go and do the other one, which is our subscribe.html and our subscribe.css. So let's go in and we will write those now. All right. So let me do a file, save all, save. For now, at least, I'm going to close my email, both my email files, and bring up this subscribe one. All right. Well, this one is going to need that subscribe.css in here. All right. Again, we do not need any slick nav, so we can get rid of all this stuff. This is just a real simple one. All right. So we've got that. All right. Got this. That's all fine. All of this stuff is fine. This is all fine. The nav menu, etc. That's all fine. So again, I believe what we're going to have to change in here is we're going to have to change what's in the section. Now, I do want that nav list rather than typing it again. All right, so rather than typing that, that's going to be in the aside here. I'm going to just grab it from where I had it before. All right, I just did put it in. You watched me type it into email here. So I'm going to go up and grab that right here. All right, and that's in the aside. So I'm copying that and just in here, I'll put it there. Now I've got that. For some reason I lost my aside, but we'll put it back right away. All right, let's move. There. All right, let's move this stuff over. That all looks fine. Okay, good. Now, the only thing we have to do is change our section, which is going to be almost remarkably easy. I'm going to get rid of everything except I'm going to save. I'm going to save that the H1 and the paragraph, and we're going to change both of these. So for the H1, we say, thank you for joining my email list. Okay, that's fine. And what else do we have in here? There's our H1. So for our paragraph, you will be hearing from me soon. In the meantime, oops. In the meantime, please feel free to browse through my site. And that's it. Now that looks here. Let's see what happened here. D equals nav list. Do I already have the nav list in here? I guess we already had it in here. Okay. So I don't, oh, I've got already in a main aside here. Some reason I got it in twice, but that's okay. We'll remove it right here. There. All right. So what should happen is once we submit the form, it should come back in here and go to this page, which has just got on it, the H1, thank you for joining my email list, and the paragraph. We have not styled it yet, but let's go back to email.html and let's fill it in. And click subscribe. Okay, it says it isn't working, which means we may not have hooked it up yet. That's okay. Right, we've got email.html. Yeah. Subscribe.html, subscribe.html. Trying to figure out where my error is, and we'll figure it out. Let's style it first, and we'll come back and look at it, okay? All right. So for the subscribe.css, again, remarkably simple. That's down here. All right, 580, right, that's all good. The H1, 140.5. All right, we don't need this first letter anymore. We don't have an H2, we don't have an H3. So we can get rid of that. So this is all we have, and I don't even know if I need the paragraph, so. All right, I want to come to the subscribe page itself and open it up. There it is. If I click here and put in my information, Says the page isn't working. All right, if the problem continues, yeah, contact the site owner. So let's look and see if we can figure out why. So it is the email page, subscribe.html and .html. Method is post. I mean, the page is okay. You already saw that because if we bring the page up in live server, it's totally fine. All right. You can even jump back, as you can see. All right. But if we go here and we fill all that stuff in, we're getting a page isn't working, which isn't great. Not going to do anything though. You don't need this either, but that still shouldn't be doing anything. Post. It looks syntactically like it's correct. I mean, when we open it up, it comes up okay. Trying to figure out, because normally if you get an error in something like that, like we're getting, where it says the page isn't working, the problem is normally in your form line. But I'm looking right here and it's telling it to call subscribe.html, which is legal to do. Our method is correct as post. Right? Oh, maybe it should be a get. That's probably what it is. Let's try that. There we go. All right. So we can now bop back and forth. And once you fill this in, boom. Okay. So we've now done the work for the chapter 13. All right, the chapter 13 Halloween. Let's jump right into chapter 14 in our book. I'm going to close a few of these things. And we're going to do chapter 14, which is an extremely short chapter. I'm going to close this. And the next thing I'm going to do, just so you see it, I'm going to do a file, save, and then close this, and immediately go in and take my chapter 13 folder, copy it, and paste, and it'll become my chapter 14. Okay, so I've now got that. Now let's go back into the book. Now, if you notice here, literally 9 pages long. So we'll go through this chapter fairly quickly. As they mention here, in this chapter, you learn how easy it is to add audio and video. There are different ways that you can add either to a web page. All right. They'll start by talking about some of the most common media types that you will get. Now, one of the problems with audio and video, at least in the past, one of the problems, and it's getting better over time, But one of the problems with audio and video has been that there's not universal agreement amongst everyone how all these formats should be done. In other words, what is the accepted audio format? What is the accepted video format, etc.? And there typically is not a lot of universal agreement. So governing bodies got together and tried coming up with what they considered to be kind of a standard audio video format. All right. And they have pretty much, but not everyone abides by it. All right. Now, with most people, all right, just so you know, and you might care, you might not, but these videos that I create, all right, on Teams, they basically get saved into an MP4 format. So usually with videos, that's a very common format. All right. If you get podcasts that are totally audio, a lot of times they're in an MP3 format. All right. So MP4 and MP3 are kind of the leaders in this, for lack of better words. But let's go through it. An intro to media on the web and a web page with audio and video. I'd like to try to get this done, and it shouldn't take that long, hopefully, to do the Halloween one for chapter 14 here, and then we'll take another break. All right. So as it says, common media types. All right. And as it says, there are actually dozens of different types, as they'll show on the next page. Okay. And it says these media types are nothing more than containers of information used by different kinds of media players. All right. They mention here, it says occasionally you may need to convert a media file from one type to another. For instance, you might need to take an MP something that's in a .avi or whatever file and put it into an MP3 or MP4 or whatever. By and large, most of these converters that are online for free work well. I want to tell you one type of problem that you can run into that doesn't work well. All right, you may or may not remember, but earlier this semester, there was one day where I created a file, and for some reason, it never converted to a .mp4. It became a .mp4.cron file. I think it was cron, C-R-O-N, I believe. And I didn't know what the problem was, so I looked it up, all right, online, and there were a lot of advertised players. Oh, well, run it through this and it'll turn it into an MP4. None of them worked because I tried all of them. All right, so I tried to bring the file up by itself. I manually went in and made a copy of it, changed the extension to just .mp4, brought it up on screen, all right, but it was a 3-hour lecture and it only showed like about the first few minutes. So basically the file was garbage. Now, the reason I'm telling you that, the same thing happened the other day. All right, and I think it was when we were going over that, it was about 2 hours long. It was one of it might have been when we made that Flexbox thing with Rankin, and he had the pictures, the instructors in it, etc. The same thing happened. But in that case, when I manually changed the extension to .mp4, it kept all of it. It was a 2-hour and 3-minute long video. It kept all of it, except for whatever reason, it cut off the last 6 minutes. All right. So what I'm saying is, weird stuff can happen, especially if you're trying to go from one format to another format. All right. So MP3 and MP4 or MPEG-4, which is typically the same as MP4, all right, are probably the two best known. Now, you'll notice if you look at both of these, there's WebM and there's OGG. OGG was supposed to be the open source, open standard media type that everyone would agree to use, except they didn't. All right. So it's still out there. And it's, like I said, it's still one of the recommended types, but most people I know, whenever possible, they save things as MP3 and MP4 files. The WebM, notice it says supported by all modern browsers except Safari. Well, if you've got an iPhone, and unless you put another browser on it, I believe it still is Safari is the browser that you get with an iPhone. I don't know. I've got an Android. All right. But I know that at least that's the way it was. So you're leaving off a big market then. Okay. All right. Now they go through the conversion process again. The easiest way is to go and just key in free online, media converter, or if you want to do an audio file converter, or free online video file converter type of an idea. All right. It says you rarely need to convert an audio or video type from one to another. All right, because most players identify the media types and treat them as though they were MP3 or MP4. Like I said, I gave you that cron example where it doesn't. So a media type then, as they say, is a container. There's a lot of stuff that basically over the years, they've made it much easier. They being the people who said all this stuff, it's much easier now to include audio or video files than it used to be. I'll just leave it at that. It used to be much, much harder. So how to use HTML audio and video elements. Let's look at the examples. All right. Hopefully, at least, source would make sense. All right. And what I mean by that is, that's the file you're getting. Now, if you're going to set up a player, all right, in your browser, you can set up width and height. All right. You can have controls. You can even set it up for a poster, and a lot of people do that, especially for MP4 files. Like if you're going to show a trailer for a movie or something, you might want it when it comes up that it's got the poster for the movie. Loop, if you've got something that's very short and you want it to continue to play over and over and over again, you can. All right, autoplay, as it says, start playing as soon as the page is loaded. Some people like that, some people don't. So if you look right here, this is a way you can put some of this stuff in. And they're going to show different examples. All right. Now, with the first example there that they're showing, says with just a source attribute, you've got no control over the poster, the width, the height, because you're just throwing it in there. Okay. Now, you might say, well, big deal. I wanted to show you something quickly here. All right. At least I'm going to try this just for the heck of it, and we'll see if it works. So I'm going to come in here, and as I often do, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it garbage. And in this garbage folder, I'm going to come in and just manually put in here an index.html file. All right, then I'm going to open this garbage thing up in code. All right, now I'm going to come in here and just literally Google okay, and here sample MP3 audio files. All right, you can see this one. Okay, not much in there. There, that's it. I'm going to download it. Notice it's not small. File size, 54 meg for that. All right. Let's see. Click the download button. Yeah. Open the WinZip file. Well, let's see. So let me see if I can grab it. I'm making this much harder than it has to be. All right. No, it's giving me WinZip. I don't want that. The point is this. All right. What I can typically do is if I come in and download, let's say an MP3 file, I can literally just add it. All right. So I can basically bring it in, with an audio tag, say source equals, and boom, it's there. Now, that's a crummy example, so I want to give you a decent one. All right, I'm going to come in here into here, and we're going to start it up like we always do. All right, and in the body, I'm going to do this. To me, this is remarkably easy. You may agree, you may not agree, but I'm going to come out here. I'm going to close that because I don't want it. And I'm going to go to YouTube. All right, and under YouTube, I'll grab this thing, Senator Christie's reaction after Trump cancels something. I don't know. I don't know what it is. All right, and I'm going to come in here. All right, there it is. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to click share. Okay. And now I'm going to click where it says embed. And I'm going to grab everything that's in here. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. And I'm going to put that into my body section. Exactly as it is. Now, normally I'd format it, put it over multiple lines, etc. It's no biggie. All right. There's a meta. And I'm looking here. It doesn't like something that's in here. It looks like, well, I don't know what it is. Special characters must be escaped. Never had to do this before. Let's see if it works. Of course not. All right, it's got that initial scale. Okay, so try this again. All right, I don't think I put it in the body tag. There, that's better. Now it's in the body tag. And let me bring it up. And there it is. That's literally all you have to do to put that in. Now, the reason I'm showing you that is it's very much similar if you want to put in an audio clip. And in here, you can go in and you can modify, but just like with a picture, if you modify the height and width, you can make it look a little weird scale-wise. This is telling it to go out to that YouTube address. There's the title of the player, no border around it. I don't know what the hell an accelerometer is. I don't care. Allow full screen. Typically, you want that, so if they press the button, they can see it full screen. That's literally all you have to do to go in and bring in a YouTube video. And it doesn't have to be YouTube. Most videos that are out there, they've got an embed like this in there where you're able to do that. That's literally, like I said, that's basically all you have to do. Now, they give you some accessibility guidelines in here. Remember, all right, as it says, if the audio or video has essential content, you should provide a text version. All right. Don't use autoplay, period. Just leave it at that. Because you're taking control away from the user. So you don't want to do that. All right. So as it says, to play an audio file, all you need to do is code a source attribute that refers to an MP3. To code a video file, the same thing with an MP4. And I even showed you with a YouTube. All right. So they've got their pages in here. And there they put in an audio file, 21 seconds. And they've also put in the video file. So as it says, the page offers both. Okay. The audio is an introduction of the speaker. The video is the video of the speaker. All right. The poster is used to display an image in place of the media type when the page is displayed. So there's your poster until it starts up. The controls are displayed when the page is loaded. All right, once the video starts, the controls are hidden. If you move the cursor off the screen, off the video rather, they reappear. So again, you've got control over how that's set up. The HTML, all right, if we take a look in here, there it is. So here's the audio. All right, and here's the video. You'll notice for the source on both of them, all right, I wouldn't recommend, I mean, what I could have tried to do, and really what I did, you could say, is non-recommended. And what I mean is, when I showed you that YouTube video, what happens if that gets removed? All right, I'm just going to get an error, which could look really bad on a page. Now, I could have gone in and probably tried to download that particular YouTube video and done it like that as well. I think that's it. Yep. So let's go in and let's take a look at what we're supposed to do for the Halloween Superstore for this chapter. Again, that's all of it right there, okay? So it says in this exercise, you'll create a personal page. All right, well, there's personal right there. All right, so we will have a page that's called personal, evidently, and it'll be right on our home page. All right. In fact, let's see, I guess we'll probably put it into a folder named personal. Okay, will tell us in a minute. So to create this, copy the index to the personal folder, then delete everything from the section, modify the URLs accordingly. Since we are going to put it in the personal folder, we'll need all that // in front of everything. All right, again, I don't care about the current page. Modify the vertical navigation menu so that it provides the link shown. Create a new style sheet. So we're going to have a personal, in our personal folder, we'll have index.html, and we will make a personal.css. All right, probably, I would think at least this isn't going to take that long, but we'll see. So let me again open this up. Again, this is chapter 14, I believe. So let's open that up with code. Let's start by, right now, let's see. In fact, I'm going to look and see what this looks like right now. We do not have a folder according to this that's named personal. So I'm going to make one like this. New folder, personal, and I'm going to drag the index.html file into personal, but I'm going to make sure I do a copy. Okay. Now, to know whether or not that works, it's not going to look like much right now because we haven't really done anything yet, but close that garbage one I just made, and let's open up the other one. All right. So now we've got a personal. It's got an index in it. And if I bring that file, what I want to do, and I run it, it should look just like the homepage, except as you can see, my links aren't there. Okay, so let's fix those right now. All right, so taking it from the top. All right, again, we want our styles. We're going to make a personal.css in just a minute. All right, we haven't made it yet. We don't need any slick nav stuff. So again, we're going to remove all that. All right. Since these are out of here, I've got to do a .. I'm going to have to do the thing. So again, I'm going to copy the .. and I'm going to bring it into here. And we won't need a mobile menu, the nav menu. All these, again, will have to come in and have in here our .. And you'll notice there's the personal index. Okay. We have not done anything with that previously. All right. I'm going to move this aside up. So it's right after main. And then I'm going to take everything in the section and get rid of it. So all I have are my blank section tags in here right now. And again, we really and truly don't have a lot of code or whatever that we have to put in here. All right, just so you know, there's not much. 10 or 15 lines, something like that. All right, so we'll call it video player. So if we want to do any styling on it, we'll add controls, right? You can see we've got beginning and ending video tags. And in between these, we've got to give it a source. And that's already provided for us. So that is in // media / Hobbs Grove. We'll use the MP4. All right. Now, the rest of the stuff that we're putting in here, there's different ways of doing this. I want to say that again. There's different ways of what I'm about to show you. All right. And I went back and had trouble doing it using a lot of the new tags. So I went back and redid it using the older types of what methods, and it worked fine. So like I said, there'll be about a dozen lines in here. Close this. Now you'll notice in video, we put a source. So this is all the video. Now we're within object tags. All right. And we're going to put a bunch of stuff in here. All right. Now there's just a couple more lines. Okay. Now I'm going to put a weird looking tag in here, and we're going to go back and look at everything in just a minute. But this weird looking tag, all right, there are still users out there that are using older versions of Internet Explorer. They may have problems with this. So we're going to put in here this. All right, that's it. First, if I keyed it in right. All right, so there we've got it. Does it play? All right. So that's all good. We haven't hooked up our spreadsheet yet, our style sheet yet. So we'll do that in a minute. But the point is that worked. Now, why you have to put in this junk and basically repeat everything is beyond my comprehension. But again, this is saying if you're not using right there Internet Explorer, which is what we're not. But the point is, what I don't get is virtually what we're doing here is almost the same thing, except, all right, we've got the application X Shockwave, all right, we've got the mode transparent, and we've got the quality high. What we don't have is this. It's not set to name equal movie. It's instead put in there as part of the object tag. And it's just some weird quirk over the way you used to have to do things when you were using Internet Explorer. Because for years, for lack of better words, Microsoft was basically kind of infamous for not going along with and doing with what everybody else did. All right. Now I'm looking in here and let's see. So we've got under styles. Did we make a personal one in here? I thought we did, but I don't see one. So we'll make one right now. All right, I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab the main one and I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to paste right there. And I'm going to call this one personal.css. All right, and I'm not going to change anything in it, but I'm going to go back to my page here, and there it is. Now, there are certain things that could be done here. We could center this more with the title, etc. You could play with that if you want to. All right, but to my knowledge, it works. All right. So I'm going to give you a break in about 1 minute, but after we get back from the break, then we're going to jump right into chapter 15. You'll notice chapter 15 is on CSS transitions, transforms, animations, and filters. All right. So I've got 10:39. Let's take 10 minutes. Come back at 10:50, please, and we'll finish this up for the day. All right, it's 10:50, so I'm going to up. And I just realized as I went in and looked that I did not do the exercise for this one. So I am going to lecture on 15, but we'll pick it up then tomorrow going over the Halloween exercise for chapter 15, because I'm not going to do it in front of you and probably make a fool out of myself. So chapter 15 is how to use CSS transitions, transforms, animations, and filters. For lack of better words, what we're talking about doing here, like I said, for lack of better words, are creating special effects. All right, so we start with transitions, and much of the stuff that they'll show here, you can do it in ways not using CSS. All right. For instance, as it says here, they'll talk about how to code an accordion using transitions. All right. We will do an accordion later, and we will do it with JavaScript, which I think is much easier. All right. Then they talk about a gallery of images with 2D transform. There's other ways you can do image galleries. Then they'll talk about CSS animations. I find these working with keyframes and the like to be a little bit confusing. There's other ways of doing that as well. And finally, it'll end with talking about filters. All right. So again, when we get to the end of this, all right, it'll put us here. Add an embedded font in a story for providing printing for the story. So we'll do that one first thing tomorrow. And then after that, chapter 16, adding a transition and an automation, we'll do that. And then chapter 19, which is literally bringing in some JavaScript and some jQuery. And this will be the way that it looks, the final thing will look when we get done. So we'll do those three tomorrow, and that'll finish everything up in here. All right. I have no idea how long that will or will not take. If by some chance we have any extra time, I'm going to jump into that example that I showed you earlier today with the form and go through that in a little more depth and breadth of coverage. If we don't have time tomorrow, then I'll start Thursday with that. All right. Again, there is no test this week other than your written tests for chapters 11 through 18 or 19 or whatever it is, and the Halloween exercises. And they're not due until the 8th. All right. I will tell you, because I'm sure I'm going to get a nasty gram today from Rankin if I haven't already. I have not done the attendance. The way that I do attendance is that if you've turned in anything in the past week, you're marked present for that week. If you've turned in nothing, you're marked absent. Now, there's one or two of you who have turned in nothing, to my knowledge. And if that's the case with you, you were marked absent last week. I'm going to look, and if you still have turned in nothing, you'll be marked absent for this week. And with any internet class, which is what this is, if you miss 2 sessions, that's like you missed 2 weeks of class. So you're literally kicked out of the class. I have to start the paperwork, and then Rankin will do the rest. If you think that was done in error, just send me an email and let me know, and I'll let the people at Rankin know. All right, so let's jump into the book then. Notice as it says, transitions let you change one or more CSS properties at a time. All right, so they mention here, it says the figure on the next page summarizes the 5 properties that can be used for this. All right, the transition property itself, it's kind of like with working with margin or working with padding, that you can set everything at once or you can set it separately. All right. So examples in here, and they're very simplistic examples. As it says, the first example uses a transition to change 2 properties applied to an H1, that being the font size and the color. All right, so it sets the font size to 120% and the color to blue. Well, so basically it does this. It says, if you take your mouse and you put it over this, this will change to this. All right, that's a transition type of effect. And as you can see, this is what you want to change. That's the amount of time. There are different timing functions that you can use for this, and you can set a delay. All right. So to do the example that they show here, this is what we're doing. And the key takeaway, the key thing is right here. All right, we're telling the font size to change over a 2-second interval. Now with easing, there is an ease in and an ease out, and it all basically starts to work with, do you want this to go faster at the beginning and slower at the end, or do you want it to go slower at the beginning and faster at the end? All right, so that's what they're dealing with right there. All right, so as it says, and I'm not going to read this to you, property, duration, timing function, and delay. You can be as intricate with this as you want to or need to be. What I've always found out with transitions, there are other ways of doing them other than what's shown here. But if you work with transitions, they're either going to look really good or they're going to look really bad. Now, I want to very quickly show you something that's related to this kind of tangentially, but so sort of related. And that is when we get into the Java script and jQuery portion of the class, we'll look at jQuery. I think it's jQueryui.com. Hopefully, of course, that would be wrong. Oh, because I spelled it wrong. jQueryui.com. Thank you. And when we look over here and you start to look under this and you go down to effects, for example, there's easing. And they will show you different ways that you can do easing. All right. And again, like you see, there's demos and there's stuff in here. Whenever I've done any kind of work with transitions, I've used this. I find this much easier than the stuff they mention in the book. That said, I still want to go through it just for completeness sake. All right. So as it says, the transition is designed to provide a smooth change from one set of properties to another. All right. I would put smooth right there. I mean, I would have put that basically in italics. What's smooth to one person may not be smooth to another. And if you say, I don't understand what you mean, well, when you look at some of these timings, like 2 seconds, for example, change that 2 seconds to 0.5 seconds, which means it's going to go 4 times faster. Because you have something happen so fast that it's faster than in the blink of an eye, and people don't even realize something has changed. All right. So they have you create an accordion next using this. Now, this is an accordion. If you've never seen an accordion before, the idea is if you click on this, it'll bring an answer area down in here. There they've clicked on this and there's your answer area. Normally, if you click on it again, the answer will disappear. Depending on how you set this up, sometimes you can only have one of these accordions open at a time. Sometimes you can have multiple ones open at a time. All right. It's not a lot of work doing this. So notice it's all set up with H3. Those are the headings in blue here. And then divs for the answers. All right. And then they've come in here, set these up. Now, just to show you the example that I had given you, I gave you that form example, which is part of this gym program. With this gym program, I've got a file in there called faq.html. Well, this is using JavaScript to basically do the same thing. I think, again, this is much easier, but that's me talking. Not everybody is going to agree with that. And if I go back again to where I just was right here, Notice if I go to accordion, all right? And if I bring that up, this is set up to just show one of these at a time. And I think after you show one, one will always be showing. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because if you look at these examples and you go down, they give you the source code. And guess what? That is basically all you need to make the accordion work. You need to create an accordion, which is what this is in here. All right. And then you need to tell it to turn on the accordion. That's it. So I think doing it this way is much easier, more intuitive, and more straightforward than what they show in the book. All right. I'd rather do it with JavaScript. Maybe it's because I know how to do both, and I guess I just find doing it with JavaScript, like I said, easier and more intuitive. But if we look at this, here we're telling it to transition over a 1 second interval and ease in and ease out. So again, typically when you do both, it'll go a little faster, then slow down, then speed up again. All right. All right. Transforms, as it says, that allows you to rotate, scale, skew, and position things. The main properties, again, are shown on the next page here. I'm not going to read these to you. All right. I'm looking, and I'll try to find you a good article on this stuff and include it in tomorrow's email. All right. And to be honest with you, again, I believe I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. On W3 schools, there's transform. And I think they go over a lot of it too. So again, notice what they're doing. They're rotating things on an angle, they're skewing it, they're scaling it. And that's what this next section is about in the book here. So these are different things that you can do. So as it says, the image is rotated to the right when the cursor is moved over it. All right. Transforms are often combined with transitions, it says, as shown in the example. Again, these are all done for special effects. One thing I'd mentioned much earlier in this semester is be real careful, because to me, what we're doing here is we're doing a lot of stuff that technically is not necessary. And you might be doing it solely for visual effect, which is okay, as long as you don't overdo it. All right, because I've seen a lot of sites that go through this stuff, and it's just, after a while, it's just, wow, it's just one effect after another effect after another effect, etc. And you kind of lose what's going on after a while. So there's the different ways that you can apply transforms. All right, and they give you the CSS. And you'll notice, again, I'm not spending much time at all on here. We're going to be done probably within 5 or 10 minutes. All right. Just because, like I said, I don't think it deserves any more time than what I'm giving it. All right. The animations, notice the key word here, simple. Again, you can do animations also with what I showed you with jQuery. Somewhere in here, I don't know where, but I know that here. Well, there's a color animation. All right. But if we do that, we tell it to animate, pretty obvious, I think, at least, what's going on there. All right. You're stretching that out, you're changing the color, etc. That's also a pretty darn simple example. And again, if I go down to here, I can view the source. And you'll notice there's a little bit more work that's being done in here. But again, to me, it's much more straightforward than doing it through just CSS. CSS is great. I have no problem with it. But I think that CSS is best used when you are working with colors and fonts, etc. But with the stuff they're showing in this chapter, I just think there are better ways of doing it than by using CSS. And that's just, like I said, that's just my opinion for whatever my opinion is or is not worth. All right. So when you start working in here, notice what they're doing. So they're moving it over from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, and they're changing the color. All right. So it says here, the animation name property points to an at keyframe selector. This is what I don't like about using this, are the keyframes. For a simple animation, the keyframes rather, are set automatically, but you can define them yourselves. Again, if you're doing a little bit more complex type of animation, and they're doing it here for a slideshow. All right, so they're taking an unordered list and they're making a slideshow out of it. It says the animation works like a jQuery slideshow. It does. But doing a slideshow with jQuery is much easier than what they're doing here. All right. In fact, when we get into Bootstrap and we talk about creating a slideshow, it's simpler still. All right. You know, maybe you've heard that old saying, that, the right tool for the right job type of thing. All right. And I'm really a strong proponent of that. I believe in that. All right. Finally, the last thing I think that's in here are filters. So you can play with coloring. Notice blur, brightness, contrast, etc. So here's some of the stuff. Again, to me, you're doing that for effect. There's nothing wrong with any of this. Nothing. But like I said, I think there's better ways to do it. Then they end here with 10 different filter methods applied to the same page, so you can see the effect. All right. It's funny. Years ago, when I was a little kid, yeah, because I'm that old, but when you took a picture, it was in black and white. All right. Then, of course, color came. But now with many people today, black and white is in again, and they like it. So that would be an example where you could use it here, saturate or grayscale. And that's it. So I will look at this tomorrow. If I think it's worth our time, and I'd like to, just for completeness, we'll go over the chapter 15 example. All right. When we get done with that, we're going to jump into the rest of the book. And if you do look quickly at the rest of the book, whoops, the rest of the book says, find it. All right. Chapter 16 is users, usability, and web design. Again, a short chapter. All right, with some design guidelines. All right. Come on, show what you. And then 17, if I can find it. There we go. All right, 17, how to deploy. We're going to attempt to use Netlify, and see if we can deploy our website out to the internet. Then in chapter 18, we'll look at some very simple JavaScript that will help start to transition us into JavaScript. Now, again, I want to make sure everybody hears this. I said it before, but I want to say it again. So tomorrow, I'll look at the chapter 15 Halloween thing, all right, and see if I think it's worth us going over. Probably we will, probably. All right, then we'll go and lecture on chapter 16, and I believe there's a chapter 16, and that one's actually on transitions and stuff. So that one we'll do for sure. All right. Then there isn't one for 17. All right. And chapter 17 again is deploy. So rather than doing that, we'll see if we can deploy one of the sites we created earlier out to Netlify. Then we'll go over chapter 18. And even though it's 19 on our Halloween exercises, we'll do that exercise. All right. That probably will take about the same amount of the period as today. If it does not, we will jump right into that form example. In fact, maybe I'll just give you the whole doggone website. The reason I didn't is I didn't have time to do a very good job of making it responsive. So if you look right here, this is the site. I take full blame for that, but so if we look, there's the index, and I believe, I mean, that isn't bad. That doesn't look too bad. All right, but if I go here to about, and that's still not real bad. All right, and if we go to FAQ, again, not bad. All right, and this had to be made smaller, and I didn't do that, as you can see. There's BMI. All right, and this looks terrible. And I believe the last one, the contact, that looks bad too. So it's not going to be perfect at all. I didn't have time to go and finish those, but we'll go over that too, either tomorrow or on Thursday. Friday will be our regular lab day. Okay, so that's all I have. Okay, until tomorrow, I'll talk to you then. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks.